For 6 years, the world believed she had vanished forever. Search teams gave up. Her name disappeared from the news. Even her family was told that there was almost no chance she was still alive. But they were wrong. When rescuers finally found Elena Fisher, a 24-year-old marine research trainee from Hamburg, Germany, she was living alone on a forgotten island in the Arabian Sea. She had survived without modern tools, without communication, and without seeing another human being for years. The unbelievable part was not how she stayed alive. It was that after so many years of complete isolation, Elena no longer knew whether she wanted to return to the world she had once called home. And the reason behind that decision is far more shocking than anyone could have imagined. Elena Fisher had always believed that the sea rewarded people who respected it. Born and raised in Hamburg, Germany, she grew up watching enormous cargo ships glide across one of Europe's busiest ports. While most children dreamed of becoming athletes or celebrities, Elena spent her weekends visiting maritime museums and reading about ocean ecosystems. By the age of 24, she had earned a place as a marine research trainee, and her first international field assignment felt like the beginning of the career she had always imagined. That assignment brought her thousands of miles from home to the Arabian Sea, where an international research team was studying changing ocean currents and collecting environmental data around a chain of remote, uninhabited islands. The mission was expected to last only a few days. It was considered routine, carefully planned, and backed by experienced scientists who had completed similar expeditions many times before. Everything seemed perfectly normal during the first 2 days. The weather was calm, the equipment performed exactly as expected, and the crew followed a strict daily schedule. Elena carefully recorded measurements, organized samples, and learned from senior researchers. She even joked that the hardest part of the assignment was remembering everyone's names. She had no idea that the sea was quietly preparing to rewrite the rest of her life. On the third morning, the team anchored their small survey vessel near a rocky island that appeared on very few navigation charts. The surrounding waters were unusually calm, making it the perfect place to complete one final set of measurements before returning to the mainland. Then everything changed. A sudden emergency forced several senior crew members to leave the vessel and travel toward a nearby support boat. Before leaving, they asked Elena to remain on board for a short time and monitor the anchor's stability. It was a simple responsibility that should have lasted no more than a few minutes. But the Arabian Sea rarely follows human plans. As the tide quietly shifted beneath the vessel, enormous pressure began building against the anchor chain. Hidden corrosion, impossible to notice during a routine inspection, had already weakened one of its critical links. Without warning, the metal snapped with a violent crack. The vessel immediately began drifting away from the island. Elena rushed toward the deck, hoping someone would notice. She shouted until her voice became hoarse, but the distance between her and the support boat grew larger with every passing second. Within minutes, the island became smaller, the research team disappeared beyond the waves, and the endless Arabian Sea surrounded her in every direction. She still believed this was only a temporary mistake. She was about to discover that rescue would not come nearly as quickly as she imagined. Panic almost always destroys a survivor before hunger or thirst ever can. Elena did not know that yet. Standing alone on the drifting vessel, she was still convinced someone would notice she was missing. She kept staring at the horizon, expecting the research boat to return at any moment. It never did. Instead, the island slowly disappeared behind the waves until it became nothing more than a dark shape against the sky. The realization struck harder than any storm. For the first time, Elena understood that she was completely alone in the middle of the Arabian Sea. Her first instinct was to restart the engine. She rushed below deck, switched on the ignition, and waited. Nothing happened. She tried again. The starter produced only a weak grinding sound before falling silent. During the uncontrolled drift, seawater had reached part of the electrical system, while air trapped inside the fuel line prevented the engine from starting. Without proper tools or mechanical experience, repairing it was almost impossible. That was when fear truly took control. Still refusing to give up, Elena grabbed the emergency radio and transmitted repeated distress calls across every emergency frequency she had been taught during training. Between bursts of static, she called the vessel's name again and again, hoping someone would answer. Only silence replied. Every failed attempt made the ocean seem even larger. Then she noticed something that changed everything. Far behind the drifting vessel, the same rocky island was still visible. It looked close enough to reach. At least, that was what exhausted eyes wanted to believe. The current was carrying the vessel farther away every minute, and soon even that opportunity would disappear. She had only one impossible choice. Stay aboard a powerless boat with no guarantee that anyone would ever find it, or jump into open water and fight for an island she might never reach. For several long minutes, Elena stood frozen, calculating every possibility. Neither option promised survival. Finally, she tightened the straps of her backpack, sealed her notebook inside a waterproof bag, took one last deep breath, and climbed over the railing. The cold Arabian Sea swallowed her instantly. The first few minutes felt manageable. She focused on slow, steady strokes while keeping her eyes fixed on the island. But the ocean had been deceiving her from the beginning. Powerful currents pushed sideways instead of forward, and every wave stole more of her strength. Soon, breathing became painful. Her arms felt heavier with every movement. The island that had seemed so close refused to get any nearer. Just when her body began giving up, her feet finally struck solid rock beneath the water. Using the last bit of strength she had left, Elena dragged herself onto the shoreline before collapsing face first onto the wet sand. She had escaped the sea. She did not realize she had just entered a far more dangerous prison. The next sunrise would force her to make the first survival decision that would determine whether she lived or became another name the world would eventually forget. When Elena opened her eyes the next morning, reality hit harder than the exhaustion. There were no rescue boats on the horizon. No helicopters circled above the island. The beach was completely silent except for the endless rhythm of waves crashing against the rocks. Every hour that passed made one thing painfully clear. No one was coming. That realization changed her mindset. Instead of wasting energy waiting for help, she began searching the island. It was larger than she had first believed, covered with thick shrubs, scattered palm trees, and sharp volcanic rocks that made walking difficult. Every step required caution because even a minor injury could become life-threatening without medical care. Her greatest concern was no longer food. It was water. The small bottle she had carried from the vessel contained only a few mouthfuls. She resisted the temptation to drink it all at once, taking tiny sips instead. By midday, the tropical heat became unbearable. Her lips cracked, her throat burned, and every breath felt dry. Then she noticed a shallow pool trapped between several rocks. The water looked clear. Without thinking, Elena rushed toward it and drank as much as she could. At first, it felt like a miracle. By the following morning, it felt like poison. Severe stomach pain forced her to the ground. Waves of nausea left her too weak to stand, and dehydration became even worse than before. She quickly realized the trapped water had been contaminated by seawater, algae, and decaying organic matter. She had survived the ocean. Now a single mistake threatened to end everything. Late that afternoon, dark clouds gathered above the island. A violent tropical storm rolled across the Arabian Sea, bringing powerful winds and heavy rain. Instead of hiding, Elena made a desperate decision. She spread her backpack, jacket, and every empty container she could find across the rocks to collect fresh rainwater. Then she stood beneath the downpour, drinking directly from the sky. It was the cleanest water she had tasted since arriving on the island. For the first time in days, hope returned. But water alone could not keep her alive. Food soon became the next battle. She searched the shoreline, carefully watching tiny crabs disappear into narrow holes between the rocks. Catching them proved far more difficult than she expected. Hours passed before she managed to trap a single one beneath a flat stone. She tried eating it raw. Within minutes, she became violently sick again. The lesson was immediate. If she wanted to survive, she needed fire. She gathered dry branches hidden beneath thick bushes and rubbed sticks together exactly as she had once seen in a survival documentary. The first attempt failed. The second failed. So did the 10th. Her hands blistered, her muscles ached, and frustration nearly broke her determination. Then, just as the sun disappeared behind the horizon, a tiny spark landed on a bundle of dry grass. A thin stream of smoke rose into the air. Seconds later, a small orange flame appeared. Elena stared at it in complete silence. It was only a tiny fire, but on that isolated island, it represented warmth, clean food, safe water, and perhaps something even more important. For the first time since becoming stranded, she believed survival might actually be possible. What she did not know was that the island itself was about to reveal a danger far greater than hunger or thirst. The fire gave Elena warmth, cooked food, and a reason to believe she could survive another day. But survival has a cruel way of testing confidence. Just when life on the island started to feel manageable, nature reminded her who was truly in control. During the following weeks, Elena built a simple routine. Every morning began with checking her rainwater collection points before the tropical heat could evaporate them. She kept the fire alive beneath layers of ash, gathered driftwood along the shoreline, and searched for crabs, shellfish, and small fish trapped inside tidal pools. Every task had one purpose: stay alive until rescue arrived. Yet every sunset ended the same way. The horizon remained empty. No ships, no aircraft, no sign that another human being even knew she existed. As the days turned into weeks, loneliness became a heavier burden than hunger. To keep herself from losing hope, Elena started speaking out loud. She described every task as if someone were standing beside her. She greeted the sunrise every morning and wished herself good night before sleeping. At first, it felt strange. Soon, it became necessary. Silence had become her greatest enemy. Then came the storm. Without warning, the peaceful sky turned black. Powerful winds swept across the Arabian Sea, bending trees and throwing waves high against the cliffs. Elena rushed toward her shelter, trying to secure it with vines and heavy stones. It was not enough. A violent gust ripped part of the roof away, exposing everything she had spent weeks building. Rain poured inside, soaking her bedding, extinguishing her fire, and washing away much of the dry wood she had carefully collected. By sunrise, her shelter was barely standing. Everything had to be rebuilt. While gathering new branches that afternoon, Elena stepped onto a loose rock hidden beneath fallen leaves. It shifted. She lost her balance and crashed against a jagged cliff. A deep cut opened across her forearm. Blood ran down her hand almost immediately. She tore a strip from her shirt and wrapped it tightly around the wound, but she knew that was only a temporary solution. Without medicine or proper bandages, even a simple injury could become deadly. Over the next 2 days, the cut became swollen and painfully red. A fever followed. Her body grew weaker with every passing hour. There were moments when she could barely stand long enough to collect water. For the first time since reaching the island, Elena accepted something she had refused to believe. She might actually die here. Not because of starvation, not because of the sea, but because of one careless step. She lay inside the damaged shelter, staring at the ceiling of woven branches while wondering if anyone back home was still searching for her. Then another thought entered her mind. What if they had already stopped looking? That question hurt more than the injury itself. But the following morning, something unusual caught her attention. Far out on the horizon, barely visible through the morning haze, a tiny dark shape moved across the water. It was the first sign of another human presence she had seen since becoming stranded. The problem was, it was moving away. The dark shape on the horizon was not a dream. It was a fishing boat. For a few seconds, Elena could not move. She simply stared, afraid that if she blinked, it would disappear like every false hope her exhausted mind had created over the past weeks. Then instinct took over. She grabbed a burning branch from the remains of her fire and ran toward the highest point on the island. Every step sent pain through her injured arm, but she ignored it. This could be the only chance she would ever have. She reached the rocky cliff overlooking the Arabian Sea and desperately fed dry leaves and broken branches into the flames. Nothing happened. The wood was still damp from the recent storm. Only a thin ribbon of gray smoke drifted into the wind. The fishing boat continued moving across the horizon. It never changed direction. Elena screamed until her throat burned. She waved burning branches above her head, hoping someone would notice. The distance was simply too great. Within minutes, the boat disappeared beyond the horizon. The silence that followed was worse than any storm. For the first time, Elena allowed herself to cry. Not because she was afraid of dying, because she had come so close to being saved. After hours of sitting alone on the cliff, she made a decision that changed everything. She would never be unprepared again. Over the following days, she transformed the highest point of the island into a permanent rescue station. She gathered large white stones from the shoreline and arranged them into a massive distress signal that could be recognized from the sky. Nearby, she built a protected fire pit and kept it stocked with dry branches, palm leaves, and driftwood collected every single day. She even searched the beaches after every high tide, hoping the sea would deliver something useful. Weeks later, it finally did. A violent storm pushed several pieces of floating debris onto the shore. Among them were plastic containers, sections of rope, fragments of weathered wood, and a strange black material coated with thick oil residue. Curious, Elena tested a small piece inside her fire. Dense black smoke immediately rose high above the trees. She quickly extinguished the flames and carefully stored the material beneath a dry rock ledge. She had just found something more valuable than food. She had found a signal that could be seen for miles. Days passed, then weeks. Every morning she checked the horizon, maintained her rescue station, and reminded herself that preparation was the only thing she could control. One quiet afternoon, a distant sound echoed across the island. It was faint, almost impossible to hear. Then it grew louder. Elena looked toward the sky. An aircraft was approaching. This time, she did not panic. She ran straight to the rescue station she had prepared, stacked the oily material onto the burning fire, and stepped back. Within seconds, a massive column of thick black smoke climbed high into the clear blue sky. The aircraft continued forward. Then suddenly, it began to turn. The aircraft circled the island once. Then a second time. Elena stood frozen beside the roaring signal fire, hardly daring to breathe. After weeks of disappointment and false hope, she refused to believe that this was finally happening. She kept feeding the fire with the oily debris, making sure the thick black smoke continued rising high above the island. A few minutes later, the distant sound of helicopter blades echoed across the Arabian Sea. This time, it was coming toward her. Elena dropped to her knees. She had survived every storm, every sleepless night, every injury, and every moment of crushing loneliness. Now, for the first time since the day the current carried her away, she was no longer alone. The rescue team landed on a narrow stretch of beach just before sunset. As they approached, they expected to find someone frightened and desperate. Instead, they found a woman who had quietly transformed a deserted island into a place where life was still possible. Elena barely spoke. She simply gave them her name and smiled with tears in her eyes. Back in Germany, her return shocked everyone. She had officially been declared missing after an extensive search failed to locate her. Friends had mourned her. Her family had struggled to accept that she might never come home. Yet against every prediction, she had survived. Doctors discovered that although she had lost significant weight and suffered from dehydration, nutritional deficiencies, and old injuries, her greatest strength had not been physical. It had been her discipline. She never wasted water. She learned from every mistake instead of repeating it. She built routines that gave her purpose, even when hope seemed impossible to find. Day after day, those small decisions became the reason she stayed alive. When a journalist later asked her what had kept her going for so long, Elena answered with a sentence that perfectly captured her journey. Survival is not about being fearless. It is about making one good decision after another, even when fear is standing beside you. Sometimes people do not survive because they are stronger than everyone else. Sometimes they survive because when everything around them falls apart, they refuse to stop thinking, refuse to stop adapting, and refuse to give up. And in the end, that can make all the difference.